A dead god. My name is Dr. Stephen Rolston, researcher at the Martian University of Kreven. What follows aren't really research notes, as much as they are a way of keeping me sane. I need them to truly grasp the magnitude of our discoveries, to keep the order in my mind, if you will. For as long as historians could remember, humanity had been looking for their god, but to no avail. Despite several millennium of searching, no deity was ever found. This never became a real issue, though, until the late 22nd century when we invented the ships needed to explore space outside of our own solar system, the telescopes required to truly peek far into the universe, and technology allowing us to drill deep into the Earth. Humanity had turned their eyes to the skies and to the planetary depths to look for answers. Neither heaven nor hell was ever found, however. Throughout the 23rd century, the disappointment grew and a new church rose. Their priests preached about a dead God, believing that ours had somehow died. The religion had its major breakthrough in 2267, and by 2300, they had already converted over a third of the people to this new belief. The necrotic church had more power than it could ever need and grew stronger every year. My story begins a good 20 years later, however, with me waking up for another day of research. I aim to find a definitive answer to the age-old question, where is God? I refuse to believe he died. August 24th, 2322. I decided to visit the observatory today. My research had been stale these past few weeks, and I felt I could use some new insights. There is only so much one can learn from the history books after all. It always strikes me as odd, though, whenever I talk to the scientists there, that we still have not discovered intelligent life. This, in spite of our technological prowess and our planet colonizing habits. I feel it would be a solace, though. I guess I just do not want to be alone. Probably goes for all of us. To be honest, I would already settle for a few ruins, some scriptures perhaps, anything but the animalistic species that dominates every habitable planet we come across. I digress. There actually was an exciting new discovery made, which my colleagues there told me about. They discovered a new species of gaver-like creatures, albeit with much more flexibility in their claw-like fingers, deep in the bush forests of Titan Major. Apparently the beasts had exhibited an irrational fear of the explorers, but that was not the strange part. Although the creatures displayed no exceptional cognitive abilities, they had somehow crafted numerous human-like statues out of the thin wood found there. The statues varied greatly in size, from a few inches to close to 10 feet, but apart from gender differences, they were almost exactly the same. I do not know what to make of it. Adam and Eve? Eden? I need some sleep. August 27th, 2322. I received a message from Gerald as I woke up today. He urged to call me back right away. Apparently, he had been trying to reach my cell all night. After all those years, he still did not remember that I could not sleep with that thing turned on. Not that it mattered much these past few nights. My research will not let me sleep, but even if I do fall asleep, I have to face the nightmares. I will not be writing those down here, however, as it is best if I just forget them. But I digress. Eager to catch up, I called Gerald during breakfast. I do not think too much of his calls during the night back then, for he had done so before. "Good morning, Dr. Stir. I hope you slept well," I began. "What, are you alone?" he promptly interrupted me. Yes, I am." "Good. Well, Dr. Ralston, I have some good news for you," he said, sounding like his old self again. "If they have not brainwashed you yet, of course." "They do try," I laughed. "What news do you have?" You should come back to Earth, Stephen. At least that church does not control everything here yet." He explained to me how there was a whole community of like-minded scientists in Tokyo, some of them atheists. Gerald gave me a contact number of one of the Martian members. From what I understood, the scientists were split into two research groups. One branch aimed to find heaven or any sign of God in the galaxy. The other held on to the belief that God lived inside all of us. It is a shame I know Gerald to be a firm believer of the latter, for it would be a pleasure to work together again. Searching the galaxy sounds like a much more exciting prospect, however. August 30th, 2322. Church confiscates alien artifacts, reads the heading on the news website today. Can you believe that those priests actually did that? The first alien craftsmanship we ever found, and they're claiming it and probably burning it soon too. No scientist will be examining those wooden statues. On a more cheerful note, I finally met the other scientists Gerald had told me about. The Martian chapter operated in a state-of-the-art research facility on the crater plains near Creven. I was able to explore the entirety of it with chief researcher Dr. Harvard as my guide. He explained to me how they had found several rich benefactors, mainly older religions, to take care of the financial aspect of their research. Most of the funding was used on the observatory, however, and it was magnificent. The telescopes that were unlike any I had ever seen before, both in scale and efficiency. Furthermore, Dr. Harvard assured me that those were not even the most advanced models they had. In the hallway stood a number of brand new telescopes, still wrapped up in their packaging, and several parts of a legitimately giant one laid scattered across the floor. I also took the opportunity to ask him about the news I heard today, though I now wish I had not. You heard the news today? I asked. About the church's latest confiscation? Yes, I did. He nodded. And I'm afraid there is even more to it than that. Come, walk with me. He led me through a series of highly secured doors into another wing of the research center that I had not yet seen. We entered a large chamber that was stacked to the brink with computers. There were huge touchscreens on both walls and at least a dozen engineers manning the technology. This is what I like to call the war room, Dr. Harvard said. In here we gather all information we can on the necrotic church and their activities. Now about today's news, we have reason to believe that they did not only confiscate the statues, but exterminated the whole species that crafted them as well. He spoke. What? Who knows what we could have found out about studying those animals? These thoughts will not let me sleep. What could the church be planning? September 10th, 2322. The workload over the last few weeks has been enormous, and I have not had much time to write down my thoughts. These are turbulent times, and I will get to that later. Now, since I'm one of those scientists at the facility without extensive prior knowledge of astronomy, Dr. Harvard had me doing mostly paperwork. I had to check the planets that had already been discarded by the other researchers to make sure that they were nothing special, check reports on the church in the war room, and listen to the oncoming radio signals, or rather radio static, from outer space. Most of it was not that exciting, but it left me plenty of time to talk with the other scientists there and focus on my research. To be fair, it was not so bad at first, but then the church began tracking us down. To make matters worse, we could all follow it in the war room. We could see how the bastards were systematically hunting us all down, forcing us to slow our research down and keep a low profile. I have to admit that I was and still am frightened. The facility itself is pretty secure, but the risk of getting caught in our own home grows day by day. It feels as if we are running out of time. With so many of my colleagues being captured, my workload increased immensely, and I even got to help out with the telescopes. It was then that I was finally initiated in the true progress that the facility had already made. Something, out there in the galaxy, was moving, and we had no clue what it was. The only proof we had of its existence were our calculations seeing that light had not even reached its part of the galaxy yet. But whatever it was, it had our whole facility confounded, as it did not seem to follow any of the laws centuries of scientific progress had come up with. 1. Our object does not move in a logical pattern and appears to be unaffected by gravity. 2. Our object seemingly pulls and releases other celestials in its vicinity at will, without any kind of foreseeable pattern. September 11th, 2322. Those are not even the most disturbing things about whatever we found out there. I was not even supposed to be clued in about what follows, so perhaps I should not write about it either, but I do not feel like I have a choice anymore. This is too much. Here's my attempt at transcribing my conversation with Dr. Harvard as he had called me into his office today. Dr. Rolston, have a seat. Tea? He greeted me. Well, I do not mean to be blunt, but why did you call me in here? There's just so much work. Ah, yes. You picked up on any signals yet? He answered blankly. Well, I began until my eyes met his. Fear? There is a reason I called you in here, Stephen. Our numbers are dwindling, and seeing as how you've helped greatly over the last few weeks, you deserve to know. He signed and handed me a file. It was about the galactic anomaly we had discovered. The calculations show that our object's gravitational pull is so strong, so powerful that it is affecting the orbit of this very planet, as well as every other one. We are dealing with something far beyond what we thought was rationally possible, he continued. Beyond what we... Dr. Harvard fell silent for a moment, and then looked up and started whispering something of which I could only decipher the word life or alive. I was frightened already. It felt as if I just stood there for hours, not knowing what to do. The man simply stared at the ceiling with that creepy blank stare. I had only managed to open my mouth as he looked at me again. We found God, he whispered. We did. Isn't that a bit rash? I answered, shivers running down my spine. No, we did. His eyes were full of steely conviction. And he knows. It's all in the file. How the light has stopped moving towards it ever since we discovered him. We still can't see further into that sector of space than we could 4 months ago. That can't be right. It is, but there's more. He grabbed the file out of my hand and began flipping through the pages. Here, at exactly 10:06 a.m. yesterday, his movements ceased being random. His eyes grew wide. He is coming. Our Lord's on his way, and we are not prepared. I must remain calm and focused. I must be calm and focused. I am calm and focused. I am so. Am I? September 12th, 2322. As was to be expected, I barely slept tonight. In the morning, I could not get up though, and it was not until noon that I finally admit that I would not find the answers in my own home. So many questions kept rushing through my mind as I checked my email during breakfast. Surprisingly, Gerald had sent me a document overnight without any further information. Experiment TZ23220518. Shing's notes. Executed by Dr. Reynolds, Dr. Starr, and Dr. Colburney and Dr. Zing. 9:30 a.m. Subject heavily sedated and strapped to operating table. Subject expects to receive a routine cosmetic procedure in order to ensure that experiment goes as planned. 9:41 a.m. Subject's cranium carved open and electrodes applied. Shocks are being applied at regular intervals. Subject displays no visible signs of stress or duress and appears to have entered the desired semi-comatose state. 10:18 a.m. Subject grunts and mumbles intelligibly. Intensity of shocks is being amplified. 10:34 a.m. Subject's rambling loudens and twitches occur. Shock strength is being ramped up again. Dr. Starr protest is denied. 11:06 a.m. Subject suddenly stops moving and goes silent. 11:13 a.m. Subject's heartbeat has dropped noticeably over the past few minutes at an astounding 7 beats per minute. 11:16 a.m. Subject's heartbeat drops below 1 beat per minute. Electrodes being turned even higher, nearing maximum output. 11:18 a.m. Subject starts moving in classified information. I strongly feel that all experiment TZ23220518 points towards us having found a way to classified. A hypothesis that is supported by all previous TZ line experiments. I was not sure what to make of it. Why did Gerald choose to share this? It was interesting to finally read some of his research, but mostly everything was classified anyway. Not to mention that I had no clue what good such experiments could do in our search for a deity. It took a while for me to be able to leave the comfort of my home and head to work, at which point I was called by an unknown number. Reluctantly, I answered the call. Hello? Who is this? Steve, listen up. I don't have much time. Gerald? What? Did you read the file I sent you? Yes, but I'll be in Creven tomorrow night. You need to meet me there at the Pelican on Desmond Square at exactly 8 p.m. Gerald, what the hell? 8 p.m., Steve. You have to be there. Gerald. Silence. What is going on? Any answer will do. Then, when my stressed out self finally got to the research facility, there was no one there, not a single soul. I carefully walked through the empty hallways as the lights lit where I went. In my mind, there lurked something behind every corner I took. I checked my cell, no calls, no messages, nothing. Moreover, Dr. Harvard would not even answer his. I tried calling my other colleagues, but none of them picked up either. Strangely enough, however, most of the systems were still up and running. All of them were seemingly working towards identifying the entity rushing towards the Earth. I had trouble understanding the huge chunks of data most of the screens showed without Dr. Harvard, though. There was one screen that did catch my eye, however, a big one in the center of the room. It showed the entity itself and the insane speed at which it was racing towards us. The thing was hidden in a black cloud, and the images were not sharp, but I could see it nonetheless. I could see the dark tendrils protruding from the smoke, and the thousands of eyes it seemed to have. This cannot be God. This moon-sized monstrosity, it could not be. I fear for the others. I truly do. September 13th, 2322. I stayed home today despite the nightmares I battled all night. At this point, I felt that even the horrific imagery, that paralyzing fear, and even the auditory hallucinations my mind plagued me with were preferable to the outside world. We were all going to die horribly anyway, I figured. At least I would pass in the comfort of my home, though possibly insane. There was no point in denying it. This morning I had effectively lost it. Things bettered, however, and from 2 p.m. onward, only minor hallucinations remained. I kept hearing a faint yelling, for example, and a deep, hushed voice calling out my name. Now, psychiatrists probably would not agree with my analysis, but I blame it on the lack of sleep. What was a lot more worrying was that I'd still not heard from anyone from the research facility. Oh well, I figured I should try focusing on other things. I switched on the television to distract me for a while. The channel offered me a dozen different documentaries to pick from, and I picked one about the growth of London as the far, multi-layered metropolis. Anything to keep my mind occupied. Why was the clock ticking so slowly? The documentary itself was not incredibly interesting. Patrick Shurin tried his best to have an exciting trip through the city, but everything seemed black and gloomy, and it had an effect on him as well. His demeanor grew more depressed and joyless by the minute, and that was not the only thing that changed, unfortunately. The people he passed no longer went on with their daily lives afterwards. They dropped whatever they were holding and watched with dark, hollow eyes. It was not long until Patrick realized this too. It would appear that some of the citizens here have taken a dislike towards foreigners, but I am quite sure that... He paused. Oh, you're here. He spoke as his eyes turned black. Then they all began staring straight at me as more and more people entered the screen. What the hell is going on? Christ, save me. Save me, Christ. Save us all. Save us now. Why? I only remember switching off the television and running outside in the moment of primal fear. There is no memory of how I got to Desmond Square hours earlier, 4:37 p.m., but at least the voices are gone. Whatever it is that is haunting me, I am sure that it will not strike me here with all these people around. One of them was Gerald. He was pale and thin, having lost at least 30 pounds, and he looked to be tired beyond belief. I had a feeling you would be early. You have always been curious, he said. Come, walk with me. I followed him as he walked towards the park. Did you read the notes I sent you? They're important, but horribly incomplete, as you could probably tell. I want to tell you what we found because someone has to know. You are not going to make the research public? I asked him. Ha! They would never let us. My entire team is dead, Stephen. The church killed them all. Why? What did you find? They believe we might have found God, Gerald said bitterly. Did you? I fear not, but believe me when I say that not a moment goes by that I hope we did. We found something, though, but you'll just have to take my word for it, as all of our research has been destroyed. He left a dramatic pause for a while. We have discovered an entity that dwells within all of us, seeing what we see, hearing what we hear, and ever so slightly controlling what we do. We first made contact with it during the experiments I sent you. It would appear that the constant shocks we applied to our test subjects had awakened it. We tried communicating with it, but soon our limbs were no longer our own. We were forced to kill the subject and report all of our findings to the necrotic church. All of this without our consent. He sighed and sat down with slouched shoulders. I don't even know if I chose to tell you this or whether this all fits in this thing's master plan. We just sat there for a few minutes until I finally knew what to say. So, does the church think you found God? I doubt it. I think they just don't want our research to get public. Not even those lunatics could incorporate that into their beliefs. Imagine what it would do to them if God turned out to be alive and almost tangible. Then what can we... He grabbed me by the shoulders and stared straight into my eyes as panic reigned in his pupils. You must listen. Do you realize what we are dealing with here? Everything we've ever looked at, everything we've ever cared about might be a lie. He started talking faster and faster. This reality we breathe, that we think we live in, is warped, twisted beyond our comprehension. Gerald, listen to me. You need to calm down. We can't know, Stephen. We can't be sure anymore. What? What can't we know? What lurks beyond the edge of our perception? Gerald whispered with an empty look in his eyes. Gerald, snap out of it. Do not trust anything, Stephen. Gerald suddenly took a step back and reached inside his pocket and took out a small handgun. I remember yelling, no, like they do in the movies. I remember the blood, the gunshot, and me running away. Gerald died today, and I have the feeling that he will not be the last. I do not know what is going on anymore. The hallucinations are gone for now, but I still cannot quite grasp what Gerald was telling me. What is even real anymore? Is there really something racing towards Earth? The television shows nothing but static anymore. Am I imagining things? I feel like a pawn, but whose game are we playing? September 14th, 2322. It is becoming increasingly difficult to write in here, not only because of the fear or the exhaustion, though those two burden me immensely through every hour that I fail to catch sleep. Not just because my dreams haunt me and break me through the horrors they make me watch. It is because I have been crying tonight, endlessly and almost violently. I witnessed my best friend's death. No, his murder, and I cannot deal. What brought him to do that, and why will these tears not stop? Are they tears? Through the constant damaging of my notebook being used to stop me from writing? Am I becoming as paranoid as Gerald? Do I really believe that there is something controlling us? I'm fully aware that these are the words of a shaken, sleep-deprived, and traumatized man, but I cannot bring myself to rip them out of this book. It is 3:15 a.m., and I am afraid to close my eyes. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because I do partially recall a dream I had. While some parts are vivid, others seem to have been oddly blurred out. Is there no place that I am safe? My dream began with me standing in the middle of a field, surrounded by a tall brick wall a few meters away from me. It was night, but I could not see stars. I took a first few uneasy steps when the wall started shifting. Bricks were continuously being added on top, while others were removed just as fast. It was not long before holes began to appear in the wall, though, places where the bricks were disappearing too quickly to be replaced. At first I could see nothing but darkness through these holes, but then I began to notice the blackness. There was something out there removing those bricks and destroying my walls. creature so very dark that it stood out like the brightest star in the otherwise starless night. I felt fear like never before as I slowly began to define its shape. Long, elongated arms made their way through and reached for me before scratching the walls in a frustrated rage as I backed away again and again, my heart pounding in my chest. Suddenly the limbs pulled back, and for a few heartbeats everything was quiet again. The walls had stopped shifting as a prelude to something much, much worse. Something was out there. Outside of this little bit of shelter was roaring, if it could even be called that. It placed two hands on the sides of one of the holes and started pushing. Long, bone-like fingers grabbed onto the wall, which was now clearly cracking. Its hands pushed the bricks out of its way as if were simple specks of dust. It was only then that I finally got to see its face, greeting me with a terrifying smile that would benefit a psychopath. It opened its mouth to reveal the void within, and I recall thinking that I should recognize that face before it all went black and I woke up, sweating and out of breath. I had woken up to the laughter of several tall shadow-like figures standing around my bed. I tried to scream, but they just kept staring. I tried to open my eyes, but nothing was changing. That is when it all became a blur. I remember wondering why they were not moving, but I woke up sitting outside on my balcony. My legs were hurting and the pain quickly urged me to stand up. Somehow I'd been sitting in the lotus position, which I had not been able to do since I was 14 or so. Are these words from my confusion? Am I really still sane? I forced myself to eat something, but I practically had to force the omelet down my throat. The dream still spooked me, and I felt like my mind had finally been damaged beyond repair. My continuing headache only served to reinforce that statement. It was as if lightning split my forehead, as if my head was desperately trying to adapt to my newfound madness. Although one thing was crystal clear, I could not let it consume me. The visions, the dreams, the disappearances, Gerald's suicide, all of it had started with the discovery of Dr. Harvard's God, not to mention the discoveries that Gerald's team had made. Or had that just been crazy talk? I had to connect the dots. There had to be some sort of reasoning behind all this. Reluctantly, I decided to go back to the research facility to gather more information, all the while wondering why I was not more shocked by everything that had happened. I just felt numb. Arriving at the facility was no boon for my sanity either. Strangely enough, everyone was there again, and I was greeted by one very excited researcher, Dr. Stone according to her name tag, who talked to me with seemingly limitless respect. She told me that Dr. Harvard was looking for me, and other researchers gathered around as she was speaking. They all held their distance, and all of them, even ones I had worked with before, stared at me with reverence in their eyes. I felt confused and oddly self-conscious. Hey guys, I hope the research is still going strong, I said, and they seemed satisfied with that. I tried to shake off the weirdness as I made my way to Dr. Harvard through the least busy hallways. There were still zero answers. Just 2 days ago, this place had been abandoned. I shivered as I knocked on Harvard's door. Steve, good to see you. Let me get you some tea. Dr. Harvard pulled back a seat for me and immediately put a hot cup of tea in my hands. Perplexed as I was, I could not help but notice that he had put me in his very own comfortable desk chair, which had been specifically made to ease the strain on his aching back. Meanwhile, Dr. Harvard sat on the ordinary office chair, usually reserved for guests. I could see the reverence in his eyes as well. What is going on? It was a question I found myself asking all too much these past few weeks. I had to try to get my answers. Why have I not heard from you? This whole place was abandoned just 2 days ago. He nodded thoughtfully. Yes, we are receiving our visions too. Our Lord really did make it all clear, didn't he? Our Lord? I asked him, shivers reaching down my spine. Yes, don't you? He smiled. Forgive me. Our Lord already said that you might still be somewhat shaken and confused from your own revelations. We are not expecting you until tomorrow. You You all had those visions too? Those dreams? Everyone here had them? Well, I don't think they were exactly the same. I saw some very personal things, and I'm sure the others did too. We rarely talk about them, but I feel that they contain the same message overall. He hesitated, and it looked as if he was trying to muster his courage. Was he afraid of me? Would you mind if I asked about your vision? What? My apologies. I never meant to offend you, he said quickly. It is just well, you're his prophet, right? I was dazed. Why me? Why was that thing doing that to all of us? It explained the awe they regarded me with, but left me in the dark otherwise. Suddenly, my head seemed to split in half as I heard a deep, loud voice echoing throughout it. An imposing voice that could only be described as ancient. You finally come. There were times that I doubted if you'd make it, but you'd arrive where you belong, the voice said as I looked at Dr. Harvard, who was looking ecstatic. You are to be commended. The other focused the brunt of his assault on you, but you didn't fall and you didn't break. I was wise to choose you as my prophet. This is unreal. I struggled to speak. What are you? I am God. Listen and heed my words, prophet. There is a lot to explain. September 15th, 2322. You are a tough one to reach, always verging on the edge of realizing the truth, but never quite making the jump. Quick to question your sanity too. But I suppose we have Zahra to thank for that. God spoke to me. I hurried to write down every syllable as he spoke, his deep voice resonating through my mind. How could I have ever questioned my sanity? This was real. I don't think he would have the strength left to corrupt your visions. He made you go through the terrible things you witnessed in a feeble attempt to push you away from me. Little did he know your force of will, your loyalty, your endurance. Fear not, my child, for his influence on you was already waning, and now that I am here, he is truly powerless. I had not been in contact with God for long, but he had already thoroughly explained everything. Our Lord had even confirmed Gerald's suspicions. There really is a presence within all of us, but it is not God, nor is it a remnant of him. He spoke of Zaro, a demon that had managed to claim us through treason. And it was in those early eons that he came before them. He found his grudges and spread them thin, discovered their flaws and whispered sin, perceived their pain and flared it high. The people he buried, he ate their souls in the sky. Their minds were broken and molded anew, and it were these shattered souls who eventually became the first acolytes. It was one of them who ultimately betrayed mankind. He turned their hearts away from me and made them worship this demon. In the end, that gave him the power to cast me away until you found me. I did not hear God speak, but he showed me the scene in my mind too. It really felt as if it had been a first-hand witness. You are, however, not the only one who knows this. There are those who actively worship this fiend and proclaim I'm dead. They did not want me to be found. The necrotic church, I whispered, but I could not hear God's voice anymore. It didn't matter. God had shown me the path, and now I only had to take it. I went to the conference room to find that the other scientists had all been gathered there already. They had built a small stage and Dr. Harvard was speaking to the crowd. Fire that'll rain down on the faithless if we do our part. Brighter days are coming, fellow catalysts. They'll soon regret declaring war on the heavens. He delivered his speech like a man possessed and only stopped when his eyes found me. And here he is, ladies and gentlemen, our prophet. He yelled as I climbed up the stage myself. He handed me the mic and left me in front of the crowd. For a moment, I just stood there thinking about how this situation would have made me feel uneasy in the past. That was before God had filled me with His strength and amplified my own. God has trusted us with one very important task indeed. We are to set the necrotic church ablaze, but we should not lose track of who the real enemy is. Their priests were misguided, just as we all were. Kill those whose spirits had been crushed completely. We are to spark the fire in those who can be saved and let our Lord wash away the filth. All of us will serve as His amplifier. I thought of Gerald. He could not help what he did. We are lost before our Lord first spoke to us, our vanity shrouded, our impotence as we masked our sins with disbelief. We can stand no longer. I enjoyed the silence that followed after I screamed that last sentence. Together we can pull humanity away, out of the claws of this fiend. Are you with me? Are you with the Lord? Then let us make the change. The crowd had dispersed quickly after my speech. While I had motivated them, it had seemed they all had been given their own particular tasks. I understood, as God had told me exactly what to do. All gears had been set in motion, and it was time for me to do my part as well. It took me a while to find them amongst the crowd, unmoving and with their gaze fixed on me. There were 6 of them, my team. September 16th, 2322. Sir, a voice spoke. They found us. My eyes were blinded by bright yellow lights as I opened them, and only when I yelled that I was awake did Lester finally stop shaking me around. I had expected I would be able to get a couple more hours of sleep at least. Ah well. I shoved Lester's flashlight out of my face and looked at our 2 prisoners. Oddly enough, they looked as terrified as Lester when the searching lights appeared in the distance. We put our guns to their heads as the lights came closer. It was not long until we could make out our pursuers' faces in the darkness. Tall men wearing broken masks and red robes. Most of them had guns on them, though some carried swords. They stopped in their tracks at around 40 feet in front of us, staring silently at the 2 acolytes we had captured earlier. I was tense beyond belief. This had to work now. He told me it would. One of them, I could only assume he was their leader, took a step towards us and raised his gun. His movements were slow, as if he was giving us time to reconsider, but he did not hesitate in pointing his weapon at me. He was the only one wearing an ornamented mask. Although it was as white as the others, it had silver markings around the eyes and words engraved along the cheekbones. It had cracks running all over it, and the left part of it was missing, as if it had been broken altogether. His visible eye showed no emotion at all, or was there anger brewing somewhere deep inside? My team finally reacted and raised their own weapons. They were no soldiers, but the fiery devotion in their eyes kept them from shaking. The enemy did the same. They had the larger number, but we had the hostages. There was no way they could let this become an actual confrontation. Their leader kept his gun high and looked at each of us individually before turning his eyes towards me again. He finally spoke with a deep, clear voice. We will escort you to the Covenant. Your guns will stay here. I quickly nodded and lowered my gun, turning to my men. Watch the host, I tried to say, but the enemy had already made its move and started firing. I got knocked down at the start of it, and the scuffle did not last much longer. A few seconds of gunshots and screaming before their leader grabbed me by the throat and lifted me into the air. I don't believe there is anything to be gained through talks with heretics. Your views are warped and vile, and you're incapable of real devotion. His grip tightened. Your companions got all the mercy they deserve, but you'll know the real fury. He threw me forward and I stumbled not to lose my footing. All my men lay dead on the ground, all of them cleanly shot right between the eyes. Put down like dogs. My captor laughed as he put his gun to my back. Half of them lowered their guns when you did. The others could barely aim. Move it, heretic. All prophets, all you fanatic leaders are to be judged before the high priests themselves. I could only look down and smile. Apart from my friends' sacrifices, everything was going exactly as intended. Your ways are truly magnificent, my lord. They led me to their vehicle, where they sat me down on a bench in the back. 3 of them, including their leader, guarded me there. He sat on the bench in front of me and stared at me again with those chill-inducing eyes. Why'd you do it anyway? Your statement wasn't very clear. Ramblings even. The work of a madman, he said, and I imagined him smirking underneath the mask. It is as I stated, I replied blankly. A first strike against your flawed belief. The man shifted his weight before he spoke again, rather agitated. Wrong, false, ridiculous. You're just as enlightened as a lot of them, he spat. Tricked by shadows and smoke you all are. You know nothing of divinity. Most of you would be blinded at even the glimpse of it. We rode on in silence for a while after that, as their leader typed on a small computer mounted to the side of the car. I guessed he was communicating with the headquarters, paid him little attention. Instead, I kept my mind on the plan, continuously running through each and every step. Do you know why God died, heretic? He spoke to me again. Naturally, you must have heard the nonsense about the Lord sacrificing himself to give us life eternal and existence beyond this one. He looked at the computer again before speaking any further, more softly this time. You spoke of visions you had, ones you believed them to be true. Did they make you feel insignificant? What does a man really represent on a cosmic scale? I admit that the change in his demeanor surprised me, but I was not really reluctant to discuss these matters. In fact, I was yearning for this opportunity to share more of the truth. There is only God's creation. The darkness comes with the light, however, and demons respond. You're all long turned away from God, proclaiming him dead and worshiping a demon in the night. He has chosen me to change that, and I've never felt less insignificant. There was a hint of sadness, perhaps even pain, in his expression as I spoke. I continued, You're all scared of what I'm bringing back. Afterwards, the air felt colder as all eyes focused on me and my opponent looked shocked. He pressed a button on the small computer and talked to it while keeping his eyes locked with mine. You heard him. We need to bring this one before the ministry right now. I bit my tongue. Perhaps I've said too much. The rest of the ride was veiled in silence as neither of us wished to engage in further conversation. In fact, the cultists seemed wary of me now. All things considered, it was a relief when the car stopped and the fresh air tickled my senses, clearing my mind. To my surprise, they had not brought me to the cathedral, but to a mansion on the side of the road. The garden was lavishly decorated, but none of it pointed towards this being owned by the church, unless of course grand, beautiful building were to be reserved for them, as I was sure many priests would argue. Move it! My captor nudged me towards the path leading to the mansion. I marched on as the Lord's voice strengthened me. Head forward, child. Show them truth and they will follow you. Only you may be the herald of my glorious return. The doorway led us through a long, narrow corridor to a room furnished to resemble a courtroom. Several priests sat behind their desks facing me, wearing masks similar to those of my captors, albeit more ornamented. Behind them were monitors on which more priests were visible, watching the ordeal. In the alcoves to the side, people hunched in the shadows using canes to balance themselves. I was led to the middle of the room, then left alone as the room was called to order. Dr. Stephen Ralston, your name has echoed through these halls before. I figured you would be brought in here eventually, but I did not expect the matter to be this urgent. I do believe I sought you out myself. As you may know, I discovered a truth of my own, I replied, to which the priest showed a half smile. You seem to mistake this for a trial, Doctor, but your heresy has already been proven beyond reproach. You speak of communing with the Lord, yet we've heard all of it before. God is dead, another priest added hissingly while the first one motioned him to be quiet. Their reactions were to be expected, but there was no time to lose here. I took the small chip that had been shoved under my fingernail and loudly proclaimed that they would find the truth on there. The priests shared uneasy looks. One of the guards retrieved the chip nonetheless. One of the computers was made secure and the chip was inserted. It contained all the imagery we had of God and proved his movement towards our planets. The silence hit like a storm as it seemed ready to erupt into chaos at any time. Faces went pale and tears broke through, tears of joy to my astonishment. Several masks were ripped off as smiles grew. Nothing remained of the fear I had expected. In fact, the priests seemed almost thankful. It was not long before one of them took my hand, a solemn look on her face. "I hear him now. Forgive me, forgive us all. There is much we need to undo before he arrives." More and more voices rose in bliss as priests found themselves spoken to. A cane crashed into the screen and they promptly quietened, expressions ranging from shock to rage. Only now did I notice how the elder priest's face had remained grim throughout. Apparently their blindness sheltered them from all sorts of enlightenment. "Have you forgot the scriptures?" one of them bellowed with all force his raspy voice could muster. "Why we chose to gouge out our eyes? You knew what tidings this demon would bring, but would see yourselves trapped nonetheless." Some of the priests shuffled on their feet in unease or shame, but the brunt of them bore hostile expressions. Unaware, the blind man turned to me. "I thank you for showing us the urgency of this matter. We were foolish to think of you as merely another false prophet." I had to smirk. This went how the Lord had said. They saw the truth and saw no choice but to follow. It did unnerve me slightly that these blind old men did not seem fazed at all, however. "Perhaps you're smiling even now," he continued. "In any case, there is little left of you that can be saved. Such is the case with all those who were contacted by the devil. It is our fault for understanding the dangers your technology would bring. Seize him, burn down his base, and stop the anathema." The words did send shivers down my spine, no matter how hollow they rang in a room where no one seemed to listen anymore. Even the elders began to notice this curious lack of movement. Their speakers started voicing another command before gurgling up blood, cut short by the dagger that had been lodged between his shoulder blades. In an ecstatic frenzy, the others had turned on them, sticking their long knives into backs, eyes, throats, however they could best hurt their blind comrades. The gruesome nature of it shook something loose within me. How could the face of God incite such a violent reaction? I had to believe that it had not changed me to such a fatal degree. Even through the screen, one could still sense the power that the image contained. But how just was the silhouette hidden within a sprawling interstellar cloud? Around me the screams had slowly been dying out. The laughter too was now little more than background noise. Dozens of hungry eyes wondered about my silence. This was all wrong. I tried to smash the screen apart, but they knocked me out quick. September 17th, 2322. It took me the better part of a day to fully come to my senses. They had trapped me in a small, unadorned room with nothing but a desk and chair made out of the same thick, dark wood as the door. It was a good while before I got up from the floor, though, for I was not alone. Gone was the edge that had been crawling through my mind, egging on my darker passions, and telling me to give voice to its truth. Yet this presence, though fainter, felt eerily similar, and it too wielded God's power in its words.
"So many. You were granted so many chances, so many opportunities to come home. Pathetic child. You barge on aimlessly uncaring who else you may draw into oblivion. None of you pitiful crawlers were ever worth it."
Stephen did not take long to recover his senses, though as there was a presence there. Whatever it was that had joined him was much fainter, yet it spoke within him with the same booming power that God had wielded.
You were granted so many chances, so many opportunities to come home. Despicable child, you barge on aimlessly into oblivion, uncaring what else you may affect. None of you crawlers were ever worth it.
The words hurt, triggering nerve endings in his brain by the sheer weight they carried.
You barely have a mind, none of you do. Yet I sheltered you and granted you the opportunity to will, to think, to create, and to experience without attracting slavers. None of you were feasted upon, and you brought it all tumbling down.
Waves of pain kept surging through me as I perceived things together. This voice, it had to be. "My lord, I failed," was all my lips could muster.
A scarce improvement. Your idiocy brought them under the usurper's control, and all remaining conduits were destroyed. You are the last vestige I exist now, left as a final barb.
"Guide me. I will do whatever is necessary."
It is done. The usurper will come to your world, and one of two things will happen. Either it will shelter you for a time, as I did, or it will feast immediately. 'Tis a pity that your kind can only ever experience one harvesting.
I could feel it strengthening its grip over me, stretching out over my memories, my current state, and finally my decisions as well. My consciousness became a spectator reduced to voiceless, ineffectual objections. I was made to sit down at the desk before the voice spoke to me again.
I will end this on a final note. Now use that pen of yours and see how many nails you can peel off. Cut the screams now, not enough. You need some splinters.
The command continued for 19 hours before the body shut down completely.